I would love to hear from you. UTMB is obviously a massive, it's like the Super Bowl of ultra running. I want to hear from you. What do you think the job is to be done at UTMB with your content in total? From the second you get there until the second you leave, what do you actually want that content to achieve?
The whole vision for Free Trail from the beginning was to bring professional level coverage of the competitive end of the race to a global audience, right? To bring the ESPN analysis and commentary of trail running to a sport that was rapidly professionalizing, but I felt lacked any context and color to create new trail fans. And so that's what I try and do with my podcast and with our race activations and the coverage that we do is contextualize the professional athletes, the professional races, what's happening, why is it happening that way, and help people become fans of those athletes and become fans of professional trail running in general. So that's where the trailgating concept was also born too. The model and the inspiration was take college game day for college football and bring it to trail running, right? Like just building the hype, having the, informed analysis, predictions, prognostication, all that fun stuff that's present in a lot of other sports that are more mature and developed than ours, and see what happens. Can we develop diehard trail running fans? And, my other inspiration is Breakfast from Wimbledon, something I've been watching since I was a kid. I always loved Wimbledon, and every day they have a couple of anchors who sit and they have highlights of matches that have taken place, and then the experts will tell you why it matters and how does this impact the draw and the tournament as a whole, and which athletes are dealing with injury, which athletes are coming in with some momentum, all that type of information that sports fans love. And I think for me, as a lifelong consumer of sports media and fan of sports of all different types, I'm also just as much a fan of the pre and post race coverage as I am of the races or competitions or games themselves. I just love that stuff. And so that's always been the inspiration for the trailgating coverage that we do is, we are the pre and post race contextualizing, information sharing, entertainment, and education for trail fans, right? And so that's what we'll be doing at UTMB in the same way that we did around Western States, which we talked about is just doing a daily show where there's races happening all week. We'll be doing athlete interviews. We'll be, providing our commentary about races as they go down, contextualize those stories for a global audience and hopefully bring the story of the 2024 UTMB to more people in a way that will create more trail fans.
Perfect. Global audience. I love this. The accessibility of the sport is what we absolutely should key in on, because I think the X's and O's of, the pre and post race stuff, you guys have that down to a science. You know the history, the athletes. You can open the door for some really deep conversations that people who are, I always love talking about the funnel, top of funnel, bottom of funnel. People in the bottom of the funnel are like eating that up. And I think that you've nailed the hardcore fans of trail running. You're giving them like the absolute catnip for what they need,
Yeah.
right? When you think about the top of the funnel, you think about this global audience and how to get more people into the sport. I wonder, and maybe you've done this as an exercise. Have you ever sat down during College Game Day or any of the more popular, ESPN TV shows and dissected the different segments that comprise the show? Because a lot of College Game Day, a lot of I'm blanking on the names of like the top ESPN shows, but a lot of their formats are just a lot of short form pieces crammed together. They'll do like a rundown of like these 5 topics or a this or that, overrated, underrated. And I think that there's a lot to take from, TV has been A/B tested like crazy.
Mhm.
What's working, what's not working. And I think that what these global audience based channels are doing for mainstream sports is giving anyone a chance to access these sports, whether they like them or not. I don't necessarily care about football, but I can watch this show and pick up a tidbit that might be a piece of trivia that I call on a year or two from now. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to think about trail running in the same way, where you might think about how to offer up these tidbits of information, because to access the information that they currently need to learn, they have to sit through an hour-long podcast where they might not know the person that's being interviewed. I know like 10 ultra runners, and I've spent a lot of time with you, and I've listened to a lot of free trail, and I've watched a lot of coverage. But for someone who hasn't done any of that, they don't know anybody. They know, David Goggins, who's definitely not at UTMB.
Yeah.
That's about it. And so I think that there's this opportunity to, n- like, it's exhausting to think about, like, oh, you know what you should do at UTMB? Make a bunch of short form content. That's exhausting because it's like you, Harmony, and
Yeah.
Ryan just like handling
It's
it.
actually just
But
Ryan and I this year. Harmo's not
oh
coming.
no, oh no. Well, in that
We
case,
might have some extra help.
let me tee up an idea. And I think this kind of goes back to the college game day. What if you were able to pull in some of the formats that work really well in these TV shows into the podcast itself? And I've
Example,
seen that.
please.
So what if you play I'll call it a game with whoever's in there, right? So overrated, underrated, speaking about training specifically, like what were the things in your training that worked and didn't work? Or what are, having them go through and have like a quick fire thing.
Yeah.
So you could have that as part of the podcast. That would be like interesting and fun for the people that were listening to the hour long one, but it would be easy to clip that out and be like, great, here it is, overrated, underrated. Um, I think that you could do bits where like you ask a question pointedly that's like, what would be one tip that you would share with people trying to get into ultra running?
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't fit in the context of the pre-post thing, but what if there were 3 or 4 questions that you could ask after the interview or before the interview, just as you're kind of like, get the ball rolling, that could be easily clipped for a short form piece of
And you're
content.
saying the
So
value of this is just more top of funnel,
yeah, yeah.
reaching people who are not core endemic trail consumers.
But might be
You know, this is
interested in
something
it.
that we've always sucked at, and that I've always sucked at personally, is like doing the top of funnel stuff, which I think has been good because we've been able to build our business in a way that's made us resilient, in that we have an engaged audience of people who are hardcore fans, but we don't do a lot to reach out to new audiences. I guess
Mhm.
that's kind of what you're getting after there.
That's what you got me
Yeah.
for. I think that you could do a lot for the athletes too. One other way that word of mouth grows in mainstream sports is through trading cards, which is like, oh, that's interesting. But what if you could make sort of like a short form trading card where it's like you make a 45-second clip that's like, this is Jim Walmsley and this is why he's important. Like you said the phrase,
Dude, I love that.
you were talking about why it matters, right?
Yeah.
So imagine, like, could you write 3 sentences on why Courtney Dauwalter matters? Could you write 3 sentences on why UTMB matters?
100%.
Why Jim? And that's your script for the thing. Now that's going to take a little bit more editing to put the pieces together and get the voiceover or whatever. But could you tie somebody in like, this is why this guy is the GOAT of ultra running. This is why she is the greatest 100 miler to exist. This person is like the hottest up and coming. That's like, you're talking about why it matters to a global audience, and you are sharing the answers to trivia
All
questions.
right, Lucy, book your trip to Geneva, flying out next Saturday. We'll see you there. I do love that as an idea, and that's something that would be squarely within my wheelhouse of just like throughout race week, if we could just cut 30-second clips of like, here's Jim Walmsley. He's one of the favorites. Here's what he's done this season. Here's why he's one of the best of all time. Bing, bang,
Mhm.
boom. Top of funnel, contextualization, and that it would feed down funnel to the longer form show
Yeah.
format. Am I on
This is
track here with the content strategy?
absolutely. I'll take a first class ticket to. But no, look, here's the thing though. This is where I see every brand mess up when it comes to going to events. I'm not singling anyone out, but what Red Bull did really well when they'd have an event. Let's take what was the one where we had to run up the hill? We ran up the mountain in Salt Lake. Oh, Red Bull 400, where you run up the
Is
ski
that
jump.
dead now? That was such a
I,
good concept for a while.
I, I love that
Yeah.
event. You crushed it, man. That was a
That
fun
was
one.
so hard.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so let's just use that as an example, right? It's a event where you have to run up a long jump ski rate. I don't even know what that's even called. It's like a ski jump, and it's in the summer, so there's no snow on it. You run up this like crazy steep 400-meter track. Every other brand, if they put on that event, would have filmed the experience and like, look at everybody running up the thing. So what? Why does it matter? Like, what's going on here? What's the actual story? Great. People ran up 400 meters and nearly died at the top. What Red Bull would do going into an event like that would be to sit back and be like, what are the 4 formats that we should shoot that would be interesting and related to this event that people who don't care about running would find interesting? And they went to the event with the formats pre-planned, with the structure of the video pre-planned, so that when they got to the event, it wasn't just like spray and pray, hose down the event with your phone and try to edit it afterwards. They knew, here's our shot list of what we need to get. Here are the prompts that we need to ask. Here are the things that we absolutely need to shoot. And then they'd come back and they'd have this amazing piece of content. And so many brands go into events, whether they're the title sponsor or they've got a booth at the event, they have no idea of the format of the content that they're going to create once they get there. It's very much this concept of spray and pray. Let's hope that we got something that's like sort of engaging or interesting, or even worse, we just have to film something at this event that we can post on our
Yeah.
socials. Ugh. No, you have to go into the event with formats in mind. And so this pre-planning is exactly why I wanted to like catch your attention on this whole thing before you go to UTMB. No pressure.
All right,
You got a
buddy.
small crew, but anytime you want, I'm on the
Are
flight.
you on the Big Island next week, or which island are you on?
We're staying in
All
Honolulu.
right. So, are there
So
direct flights from Honolulu to Geneva? Because we're gonna need you. We're gonna need you on board one of those. Uh, well, hey, I love that as an idea, and that gives me some good food for thought. Honestly, I have felt like a little behind on the planning and preparation and programming for our shows, and we likely will have some extra help. It probably won't just be Ryan and I, and maybe that the good place for us to start is this idea of like the digital trading card of professional trail runners, because I think that is perfect, and it would also, like I said, it'd be upstream of being able to promote our shows, but also be able to promote our fantasy competitions, which is another thing that's kind of core to what free trail does, is that's also present in a lot of professional sports, of just like predictions and playing fantasy and engaging a fan in that type of a way. And a digital trading card would be a perfect way for us to say, okay, here's one of the favorites. Also, don't forget to go play fantasy.
yeah,
Very
I've
cool.
got two more. I've got two more things for you. Also, I personally, and I bet a lot of the audience would love to see some sort of BTS piece of content of your experience at that event.
Yeah.
So many people have this like rich experience with you on the podcast or on the live stream, but the behind the scenes of how this stuff comes together, the good and the bad of it, I think is a story worth telling. One thing that I'm seeing, and I saw a lot from the Olympics, people are running this dad cam thing where it's kind of like budget footage, but it's just like super POV, just like carrying it around dad cam style and then publishing that. And there's some value in just the raw, unpolished version. And I think, just like all the all the best videos on freetrail are just stories. It's not necessarily a podcast, but it's the story itself
Yeah.
of the event. I think that would be a really interesting one.
You
It
know,
doesn't always
Solomon
need to
just
be.
published something like that from Hard Rock that was kind of filmed vlog style, and I
Yeah.
actually found it to be really engaging and entertaining in a way that a polished documentary isn't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. One
The
more?
other last thing, mid form content. So we talked about short form content, and I have a bunch more format ideas. I'll text them to
Good
you
God, dude.
afterwards.
Like I need an AI transcript of this podcast because you're just absolutely taking me to school here publicly. Our audience is probably like, Jesus, Dylan's totally incompetent.
No, man. You know what?
What the
Actually,
hell is mid-form content?
well, okay, I'll go to mid form, then I want to go back to the short form thing. But mid form is you are covering a lot of topics. There are basically chapters in the conversation that you're having with these athletes, right? And again, going back to this point about we are trying to engage a global audience, tell them why it matters, really make this relevant to them and educate them on something. One thing that I see in a lot of the bigger podcasts is that they'll run the full long form piece of content, but then they'll pull out a relevant chapter and tee up that specific topic as, say, like an 8-minute piece that's a little bit easier to digest. And so, what you might also consider is like, what would be one piece of content, one chapter from each one of the trailgating where it's not titled as trailgating, it's titled as the topic that they're discussing, and you drop in the middle of that conversation. You give the audience that 8 minutes. It's easier to
So do you
digest.
post both of those? That's
Yeah, yeah, I would.
so you would just sort of like clutter your channel. You have one playlist that's the long form shows, and then you have obviously your shorts are top of funnel stuff, and then you also have a mid form playlist that is like what Jim Walmsley thinks about the Western States UTMB double, for example.
Yes,
Huh.
yeah, that piece of information, because I think that a lot of people would just click to see that. I'm one of those people where, like, I mean, and we see this on the Second Nature channel on YouTube, where it's a big commitment to lock in for an hour and watch a YouTube video.
Hmm.
But it's not that big of a commitment to watch an 8-minute video, especially if you know the topic that's going to be discussed in detail and it's somebody that you're following. I feel like that 7 to 8 minute window on a specific topic would actually be really interesting. We could actually test it. We could do something about, like, Aaron's content strategy for UTMB or something out of this podcast and just see
Oh, this is
which
perfect. Look at
which one.
this.
Let's A/B test this one, and then we'll put it out tomorrow. So then we'll get a chance to see. Now, the one thing I wouldn't do, I wouldn't put both of them out at the exact same time, and I would package them very differently. I would give them a little bit of breathing room. But I think that there's value in both, and I think that different people may look and
See,
and
this
look,
is just
it's
like it sounds so good on paper. It's really hard to have a
yeah,
team that can do all of this,
yeah,
especially,
absolutely.
kind of working on tight budgets in foreign countries with so much shit going on all week.
What I think could be interesting is after the discussion happens, because you and I do this all the time. We're like, oh, that one part we were talking about was really
Yeah.
interesting.
What if you pump the mid length, what do we call it? Mid form content the
Yeah,
week after.
yeah, that's exactly it.
Uh,
So write down after the thing, or make a note in like a notes app. Be like, hey, that one topic that we talked about with Walmsley was so perfect. And then when you get back and you're going through all the footage, pull that one chunk out and post that,
Damn. God, you got my
Yeah.
brain firing right now. I was reluctant to do this segment today, and now I'm like, holy shit, we got to close down. We got to close down the episode so that I can call Ryan and we totally revolutionize free trail strategy.
I mean,
Uh,
look, the one thing that I would say, especially for the short form stuff, is like the more you can plug it into your actual podcast, probably the better. Because A, if somebody gets excited about it, then it's an easy way to like send them to the full podcast. But B, it's an interesting way to just make this stuff super accessible to other people without having to do a lot of extra production work. And one place I actually saw this work really well, There's a YouTube educator by the name of John Ushai, and he does podcasts with famous YouTube creators. And a segment that he does in his podcast, it's a video podcast, and he does a segment that's like draw your income, how much you get from AdSense, from sponsors, from brand deals, from merch, from whatever. And that one piece is informative in the podcast, but it's the perfect piece of short form content. And so you kind of double dip a little bit when it comes to your content. You don't have to make everything fresh because that's just going to be way too much work for you and Ryan to do.
Okay. Geez. Awesome X's and O's of outdoor content creation. Hope that's valuable to our audience.